Sometimes in the middle of the night when I can't sleep, I listen to podcasts. The other night I must have dozed off because when I came to again, there was another podcast playing that I'd never heard before, and it's called Real Survival Stories. Duh, duh, duh. The one I happened on was about this Australian guy who decided he wanted to climb one of the most remote mountains in Australia. There's no backup there, no cell phone coverage, nothing. And so he's by the area there, and the day that he's going to start his little trek, there's this Dutchman there, and the Dutchman says, "Oh, I want to climb that mountain too, but I know nothing about wilderness climbing or hiking. Can I come with you?" And he says, "Okay." So anyway, they set out, and after a hard day trying to find some sort of trail, they end up in the spot they want to camp for the night at the base of the mountain. And there was like a creek and a rock thing, and then across the creek there's like a rock wall about 10 feet high. And so the Australian guy thinks, "Oh, I'm just going to climb up there and see what's past there." And so he goes and he puts his hand up and is looking around for a handhold. And then when he starts to pull himself up, he hears this thunderous crack, and a huge slab of rock falls down on top of him, pins him down with his legs in the creek at the bottom of the wall there. And then it started raining because it was kind of jungly there, and it was like this torrential rainstorm, and there had been like 6 inches of water, but within a short time there was 2 feet of water, and the guy's trapped in the creek, right? He can't get up because this slab of rock is lying on his legs. Okay, so as I listened to that podcast, I thought to myself, why on earth would anyone think that was a good idea to do something like that? Not to have the rock fall on them, but to do that trek thing. Yep. And anyway, so they had the Australian guy who had this experience on the podcast, and this is what he said. He said that he continually sought out extreme challenges like that because when he was a teenager, he had gone on this overnight solo hike in the wilderness and just had a very life-changing moment. He described it this way. He said, "I had a feeling that I came to call the connection. It was almost like being electrocuted. I've never been a religious person, but this time I felt like I had a full-blown spiritual experience where at the same time I realized how small I was, and yet in the same instance I was a vital part of everything, completely connected to everything else in the universe. It was a wild, beautiful, incredible feeling, and it is a feeling that I have been chasing so I can re-experience that my whole life." That's what I want to talk to you about today, encountering God in nature. I can't promise that you'll have an electrifying experience like that of being spiritually electrocuted, but something might happen. I had a much milder, similar experience a number of years ago when I was on a 5-day silent retreat. You know, when I told my husband I was going on a 5-day silent retreat, he just started laughing. And when I asked him why he was laughing, he said, "I'm sorry, darling, I can't imagine how you could go for 5 days without talking." And it's true. I do love talking. Hopefully I love listening too. For instance, on the recent holiday that Paul and I were on, I booked up the tickets. I screwed it up. So when we were on the plane, we were sitting not together, like in separate seats. Anyway, I sat beside this fascinating gentleman called Patrick, and he worked for the military, and he was like a project manager for building the big boats, ships for the military. And he was flying out to Montreal to check on their progress. He was a really interesting guy. Anyway, so we get off the plane and we're walking away, and I said to my husband, Paul, who did you sit beside? And he looked at me and said, "How could I possibly know that?" He's a bit shyer than I am. Anyway, I did not explode from my lack of talking. my silent retreat. And at the last day, I walked down to the beach and I sat by the water and looked at all the trees that were there. It was about the same time of year the leaves were changing color. And as I sat there, I realized the leaves were kind of vibrating with color. Not literally vibrating, but the color in them was pulsating. It was incredible. They just, like, they kind of shimmered in intensity of color. And I knew that I could see that because I had spent 5 days in silence trying to listen to God. My ability to see things as they are, as they actually are, and I think that's what happened to me. Like, if I spend enough time like that actually listening to God, you can get to the place where you can see things as they really are, or as God sees them. But it takes some work to get there, but it's worth it. And I haven't had an experience like that recently, but mind you, I haven't gone on another 5-day retreat either, silent retreat. I think Emily Carr, the artist from Victoria, experienced things like that too, and she tried to express it in her paintings. Listen to what she wrote in the book called Hundreds and Thousands about going into the woods. She says, "Go out there into the glory of the woods. See God in every particle of them, expressing glory and strength and power and tenderness and protection. Know that they are God, expressing God made manifest." I recently read a book called There Are No Children Here by Alex Kotowicz. Alex was a newspaper reporter, and he lived in Chicago, and he chose to hang around with 2 boys that lived in the projects in Chicago in the 1980s. The projects were like subsidized housing for lower income people. And they were huge complexes with hundreds of apartments in each complex. And he spent 6 months with these 2 boys aged 11 and 14 and described their lives. So he talked about they knew whenever they heard gunshots outside their apartment to run into the hallway and lie on the floor, because there was no windows in the hallway, and that way no bullets would come in through the windows or they wouldn't get hit by glass. And they would do the same thing at school. Whenever they heard bullets going on outside, they all go into the hallway into the school and lay down. He wrote that it was almost impossible for them not to become a member of the gang, in one of the gangs in the projects, because if you did not belong in a gang, there was nobody to protect you, and you'd get beaten up all the time. The reporter said that in the course of 6 months that he spent with the brothers, 3 people they knew were murdered. Their aunt, an acquaintance of their father's, and lastly, a good school friend of theirs. They were understandably hopeless about their own futures. How can you possibly have much hope when you know that dying at any moment is a real possibility? And how could you function or learn anything at school when you're carrying that load of grief and fear? The one thing that gave hope to the youngest brother, named Pharaoh, was an experience he had one summer on a Saturday when he and his friends went a little ways from the projects and climbed up onto some abandoned railway tracks up there where there were some trees and grass growing. I'll read the next bit. There was a fantastic view from up there, but then he was soon distracted by more immediate matters. A black and yellow butterfly wove effortlessly through the wind. Fixed on its dance, he stared silently for minutes until the rising summer breeze carried it away. The abundant clumps of white and lavender wildflowers that grew along the rails soon won his attention, so he bent down to touch the soft petals, to finger the vines as if to measure their growth. He breathed in the scent of the blooming wood anemones and then licked a salty drip of perspiration that had dropped from his brow. He was lost in his thoughts so private and fanciful that he would have had trouble articulating them to others. He did not want to leave this place. The sweet smell of wildflowers and of the diving sparrows around him. There was such tranquility here, a peacefulness that extended to the horizon like the straight, silvery rails. In later months, with the memory of the place made much gentler by the passage of time, the boy Pharaoh would come to savor this sanctuary even more. And the reporter wrote that Pharaoh continued to badger his older brother and his school friend Ricky and any other older friends he had to get them to take him back to the railway tracks because it was such a spiritual experience for him just to be there. But no one would take him. Pharaoh, the boy, like others I've spoke about, were experiencing God in nature. They were overtaken by awe. I think that being overtaken by awe is the best. While you are experiencing awe, you can, at least for a moment, forget about yourself, and that is an incredibly liberating experience. I believe that awe is worth pursuing. Awe can give us a greater sense of purpose in our lives and can increase beauty and creativity within us. It can improve our mood, our sense of well-being, and make us more curious and less self-preoccupied. What's not to love about that? And there's a real bonus of awe that it can do for us. It can quiet negative self-talk. I don't know if any of you experience that, but I certainly do at times. I know I have all these unhelpful thoughts circulating around my brain, and experiencing awe can, for a moment, mute that. And the experiencing awe can have far-reaching implications in your life, if you allow it. It can increase your sense of satisfaction with your own life, so hopefully it can weaken the illusion that our society tells of us of how to be happy. And of course, that idea is that happiness comes from materialism. Listen to this. Awe is a lightning bolt that marks in our memories those moments when the doors of our perception are, just for a second, cleansed, and we can see with startling clarity what is truly important in life. Okay, everyone, here's the application part of the sermon. I'd like to suggest some ways that you might be able to have more awe in your life. You know, I entitled this sermon, Finding God in Nature, and really, in some ways, finding isn't the right word, because it's not like God is lost and we need to look for them, like my buddy, St. John of the Cross, always says. The spiritual life is not getting closer to God. Instead, it's a journey of consciousness. We realize our unity with God. You can't acquire union with God because it already exists. It's something that's already there. And so we can realize our union with God by letting go of everything that keeps us from seeing reality. Like I said, admittedly, letting go takes a little bit of work, but the results are definitely worth it. Maybe some of you have heard of the practice called Lectio Divina. Have you heard of that? Yeah. It's like the holy reading, sacred reading of the scriptures. I know your home group used to do it, didn't it, Becky? So Lectio Divina is a kind of invites us to chew on scripture, and which in turn opens it up for us to hopefully its flavor and wisdom. Do you know what my problem with spiritual practices is? You long for the spiritual practice, spiritual experience, but you can't make it happen. All you can do is just put yourself in a place where it might happen. It's like going to look for wildlife. If you and I want to see some wildlife, we go where we are most likely to see it. But there's no guarantee that we'll see anything while we're out there. And So really, the only way to see anything is by getting yourself to a place where it's more possible to see something. I'm sorry if that sounded like a riddle. It wasn't meant to be. Okay, so today I want to talk about Visio Divina. If those words are Greek to you, they translate as sacred seeing. That was like a little joke. They're actually Latin. Thanks, Toby. I'll quickly explain how it works, and then we'll give it a go. Visio Divina is a contemplative practice, a spiritual practice, of receiving God's presence through what we see. In Visio Divina, we're going to move our awareness, our focus, into our hearts, our souls, whatever you call that spiritual place in you, and let our seeing come from a place of integration, not interrogation, connectivity rather than analysis, and just receiving rather than grasping for things that we want. Our intention is to see things from a new perspective. But the tricky part about this is the paradox of this way of seeing. It requires us to let go of our usual ways of looking at the world. Okay, here we go. Play along if you want. Let's just have a minute or so of silence to get us into a more receptive frame of mind. And then you can just go ahead and close your eyes for a minute if you want now. As I said, Visio Divina means sacred seeing and is essentially a kind of prayer of seeing with our souls, or gazing. Gazing is looking upon something with the eyes of the heart. It is not a hard or penetrating stare, but a soft, receptive way of being with an image. From this heart-centered place, if you care to, slowly open your eyes and look up at the slide that Paul's just going to put up there, the one with the tree. Okay, take a few minutes to just let your eyes wander all over the whole landscape of the image and explore its shapes and colors and contours and details and maybe symbols. Allow yourself to be simply present to the details of this image. Gradually notice if there is a place on the image where your eye keeps going back to, a place where you want to keep looking at. What is it about the place that you want to look at that intrigues you? Is it a symbol, a color, an expression? Take a few moments to simply be present to this in a gentle way. Slowly begin to notice if an invitation begins to emerge from these memories, feelings, images moving in you. In the concrete circumstances of your life right now, in what is actually going on in your life at the moment, what awareness or action may God be calling you to? Ask yourself, what is my invitation from God in this moment of my life? How am I being called to respond? As you become more comfortable with praying in this way and allowing visual elements to be a kind of text for prayer, you can begin to bring the spirit of Visio Divina with you even when you're out walking. As you receive your images, pay attention to the moments that seem to shimmer and make space within your heart to be with whatever feelings or memories these stir, trusting that God is at work in the process. Over time, you might discover that there's an invitation being offered to you in this time of slowing down and deepening your way of seeing in the world. Visio Divina is a way of seeing the physical world as sacred text. Didn't Paul read that for us in Romans 1? Everything is worthy of our attention and presence. Remember how he wrote, listen to the animals and see what they have to say about life. We don't need to decide everything, move everything into two categories of between ugly or beautiful. If we can just look at things as they truly are, we just might be able to see what is true in our own hearts as well. If we can look without prejudgment or expectation, look at ourselves in that way, we might just discover some really surprising, beautiful things within us. Okay, if you remember, we left the Australian guy pinned by the huge slab of rock in the creek with the water rapidly rising. Shall we rescue him? Well, the rain stopped and it went down as quickly as it had risen. He did not drown. And after an excruciating night of pain for the Australian, in the morning, they both agreed that the Dutchman would have to hike back to civilization for help. This was a rather dodgy proposition because the Dutchman wasn't at all sure he could actually find his way back to civilization. But he did find his way, and almost 48 hours after the slab had fallen on the Australian leg's help, he was rescued. The doctor who flew out in the helicopter told the pilot as they were flying out there, there's just no way this guy is going to be alive. He's just had too much trauma. But he was alive when they got there. And so then he was taken to a medical center about 200 miles away and treated. And he himself said, the Australian, he said, other than losing both my legs, he was really no worse for the whole experience. Well, that's enough preaching for me today. The last thing I want to mention is that for the next month, I'm running a club that I'd like you to invite you to join. If you join up, you'll receive an email Monday through Friday from me with some suggestions on different ways to find God in nature. I did not create this material myself. I took it directly from an online course that I took last spring, ironically titled Finding God in Nature. It was put on by a place called Monastery of the Heart by Mary Ann Brassett. I don't know if anyone knows her. So these are suggestions that you could try on each day if you like. And if you want, you could post your pictures or what you find, your thoughts or whatever like that on our little Facebook group. And in particular, when you're out in nature trying to experience God, I want to encourage you to find yellow things. And then at the end of the 4 weeks, we're going to have a slideshow on church and Sunday morning, and we're going to show all the yellow things that you found, because we can use the Coldplay song Yellow as a background track for the pictures, and I really like that song. So that's why we're doing yellow. Paul's going to put up some pictures that I just took over the years of yellow things. That's just a picture of my iPad case thing of the sun. It's a copy of Van Gogh. That's some leaves outside our bedroom window. That, believe it or not, is some palm leaves reflected on the door of our hotel. Isn't that cool? That is a very close-up of a yellow leaf I found that has a bit of water sitting in it. That is a picture of outside through. We have some of those glass blocks in our houses, you know, those things? That's a picture of outside taken through the glass block. Isn't that cool? Oh, and that is a friend of mine, Eden, if you're watching. Those are your legs. Those are her legs with leaves on her leggings on my paisley chair, and I just loved how that looked, so I took a picture of those leaves. And I think that's it. So right now, and while we're doing the next song, you are invited to take out your cell phone and sign up for the Facebook group. I think it's called The Place, Finding God in Nature course or something like that. So just look that up on your phone and sign up for the group, and you can participate as much or little as you please. Okay, thanks.